but
Well,
you
Oh,
hadn't
Emily, you
started
said
yet.
yeah, but Emily, you also said earlier you wouldn't have said it if we'd been recording. So why even tantalize? Like, what's
Good
the
point.
Yeah, why are you tantalizing me?
Good point.
Yeah.
I can still say
Speaks
most
to
of
the
it though. Like just like my tales of what it's like what it's like riding the subway and commuting to work for the first time in 6 months.
Yeah.
Speaking of tantalizing, I was expecting 3 juicy peanut butter chocolate chip cookies, and they are
Oh,
missing.
darn.
Oh, so
Yeah.
we're having another issue of like customer service issues again?
I guess you could call it that. And they're closed, so they can't even
They can't
be
even
held.
fix their problem.
Yeah, not that they would have been able to anyway, because it's like once you do it through Uber Eats, you're screwed. Like these are places that wouldn't have been able to deliver to you.
Fair enough. All right.
Oh yeah.
Damn it, I'm still hungry. All right, well, I'll have to figure something out.
Yeah, that's gonna be my issue as well. I'm probably still gonna be hungry.
Nutrition, that's a good subject. That's always a good starting subject. What did you eat today?
Yeah.
Who are we talking to?
Oh, we could go
Yeah, where
around
do we
down the
start?
circle, just make sure we all got good nutrients today. Yeah, I mean, I've actually, my biggest food that I've been on about is a soup. I had made a soup, and for like 3 or 4 days, I've been just eating the same thick soup, adding more stuff to the soup. It started off with some like garden herbs grown in the backyard, like
What kind of herbs are we talking?
and blending it up. I just would use an immersion grinder, just kept blending it up, added some of the cashews to it, added
Oh,
some
that's
potatoes
interesting.
to it, butternut squash to it, just kept putting stuff in it. Each day I added a new thing, blended it up, threw it in a uncooked tortilla, wrapped it up, and I've just been eating these soup tortillas survivably so. Yeah, Matt actually fried up some plantains as a dessert last night, a late night fried plantain dessert. Yeah, that was good. That was good wrapped up in those tortillas.
Now, what you're blending the cashews?
Oh, right. Well, the cashew paste cream stuff is great. I have to do another round of that. But yeah, you soak the cashews, and then you extract some, if not most or all of that like cashew juice water. Super good, like milk almost. And then you can mash them up, add a little more water, and then blend them up. And now you got, depending on how much water you've added, a special kind of cashew paste. And then from there, you can now culture it with different spices to get different results. You can go sweet, you can go spicy, you can stay savory. But then this cashew paste just glues whatever you're making perfectly together. So
including soup?
Correct. I threw it into this soup, and when I blended it in, it allowed me to create a viscosity that held together well enough for me to wrap it up in a tortilla. So you can imagine that if I tried to put a
tortilla.
tortilla. So if I put the soup in a tortilla, it would run, and I'd have a big messy beard full of soup.
Right.
But add that cashew cream, now the soup has something to hold on to with a little bit of that butternut squash, a little sweet potato action. Now I can actually wrap this thing up and, handle it without getting a big messy beard full of soup.
Damien, no offense, but you made that sound really sexy.
No, that's not an offensive thing.
Are we talking about?
Okay.
Are you saying it's food porn?
I mean, some of the language and the descriptions got a little bit, in my opinion, and just so for whatever that's worth. But it started to get,
Food can be sexy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that mouthfeel.
Oh yeah.
Well, what did you end up eating today? What was your food porn?
Oh, I don't want to. All right.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to. I just wondered.
I mean,
if anyone else got more food to add.
I mean, this morning I was feeling lazy, so I ordered breakfast in. But I I got like pancakes. I guess I ordered in pancakes with maple syrup and fresh strawberries. But at least I hope they were fresh. But you know, I had.
hope they were fresh.
I'm assuming they weren't processed or like canned. I don't know. But I had what else? Then I had some it was, I didn't have like right now until my next paycheck comes in. I actually on my last fresh direct order, I didn't order, I guess, too many fresh vegetables. So I snacked on like some Smart Food popcorn earlier, and then I had a fresh can of tuna. No, sorry, not a fresh can of tuna. Excuse me. I had canned tuna, but Cento, and I think they're a pretty good brand. And I had my organic fresh watermelon juice, which I know Flav won't get off me about, but that's cool. I don't think anybody will, actually. No, it's my thing. It's my thing. And then I just had the watermelon agave like organic pop that you guys just saw that Scarlett like would not like get off of my case about. So
Is that what all that noise was about?
Is that all you saying?
What noise? What noise?
When she was going on earlier.
Oh no, not at all. Not at all.
What was she going on about?
Oh, Scarlett? Was Scarlett making? What noise was she making?
I thought it was her.
Forgive me. You know what? Forgive me. I've lived with her so long that I've almost become like desensitized to it. Like,
no,
so
I opened something. I opened something on my phone that had sound that I wasn't expecting, so that could have been it too.
Ah, okay.
Oh, when we first started?
It was like
I
5
guess.
minutes ago, maybe.
I guess.
I think it was before I went to answer the door.
Although Emily, I'm kind of curious now. I am kind of curious though what Ish was talking about, but like the interview that.
We're not gonna.
Right.
I'll tell you, but not under recording because I don't want to waste film.
Okay.
Like, I think we've like covered enough. Like.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Of
That's
that.
fine.
But I'll tell you when you're older.
Or you can just text me. Either way.
Yeah.
That's fine. At your leisure. I just wish I knew what you were talking about, but that's fine.
I'll put it.
That's my problem.
No, I'll put it in the chat box. That doesn't show up on a recording.
No, it doesn't.
In fact.
No.
That's what it's good for.
Yes, that is what it's good for. You don't have to do it right now. My curiosity is getting the better of me right now. So, but that's okay. That's okay. I'll live until I find out. I'll be good.
Was that part of your? Was that part of your lesson plan?
Who, me? Oh no, her.
No, Emily.
What?
Yeah, it was part of Emily's lesson plan.
He who shall not be named.
Then
A lot of power.
Given the fact it probably will show up in my lesson, like.
Well, given the fact that you're talking about trolling, right?
Exactly. Although with my crowd, I'm not so sure mentioning that particular person would go over so well.
Why? They don't like snitches?
Snitches get stitches.
Some of them are legit affiliated. So like they may have been personally affected.
Oh, I see.
Which I understand being sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Like, I get annoyed when people like temper tantrum about like something that doesn't affect them personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they I know some of my students actually know some of the other people on that indictment, so
right.
So I keep my mouth shut there. Like them, I give a pass because it is personal.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So that's on my lesson plan. Trolling.
Yeah, I like that they're including the digital citizenship and defense from trolls or trolling in general. That's kind of interesting.
Well, and also like there's a whole unit on like how to recognize in the curriculum on how to recognize like fake news.
Oh, that's great.
Like about like about like checking to see if like something you read on Facebook is from a credible source or whatever. And also like teaching people about how like you may read something on social media, but like social media can be a huge like echo chamber.
Yep.
Right.
Like
That's good.
that the
That's good
algorithm
that they're
like,
teaching that.
yeah, like part of the curriculum is actually talking about like how like the algorithms of social media sites are kind of programmed to like kind of show you posts that they think that you'll agree with.
Yeah. There's a documentary on Netflix about that. About like the insidious nature of social media, and it interviews some of the people that were instrumental, like the person who came up with the like button and all that stuff.
But then there's also like there's also the curriculum also kind of touches on as well stuff about like how like stuff about like the features that social media developers put into their apps, like social media or game developers put into their apps to make them more addictive.
Yep,
like say for example, like, and I usually just ignore them, but like say for example, like the solitaire game I downloaded on my phone, like gives me a pop-up every day saying, come on, come play solitaire. And there's parts in like in the curriculum that talks about like there's parts of the curriculum that talks about like how that's on purpose, how they design the apps like for the default to be like push notifications, so to try to entice you to like play more solitaire.
See, that's interesting because a lot of the things that annoy me about phones can all be linked to that kind of stuff. Things that just like intrinsically annoy the hell out of me, like just all of the default settings for all of like the noise, you know, which is really annoying to me. And then you have people who...
Oh, I can't stand the default settings for the sound.
Yeah.
I turn all those off.
Yeah, exactly. I turn them off, but it's just like, it's annoying when I forget to turn them off after like reinstalling something or, you know, or getting a new phone or any of that stuff. And then sometimes I've been catching them changing on their own, which I don't know what kind of glitch that is. I wouldn't be surprised.
If it's not like written into like an iOS update or something.
Exactly. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm like, I know for a fact that I never, ever, ever, ever turn these sounds on, and I've already turned them off, and how are they ending back on again?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Like, I think they bake it in, like, every time there's, like, an app update or whatever, that it turns the sounds
Everything
back
to
on.
default, yeah. Yeah, part of the documentary talks about...
Which is insidious.
Yeah, it is. It talks about, you know, just the addictive effects and kind of the fact that people are spending, you know, time like, you know, that they're, I guess, maybe not interacting as much as they could be, but they're spending time on
they're
these
not interacting
apps
with actual humans.
Yeah, and they talked about like, they also
not
talked
that
about
we can right now.
They talked about depression and stuff like that linked to, I guess, overuse of social media. Probably especially for young folks who are, you know, supposed to be developing.
Yeah,
in
and
certain
there's
ways.
some of that in the curriculum too. Talk where the kids like prepare a debate or a discussion about like what an appropriate age is for a kid to start getting social media, because like honestly, like when I used to teach middle school, I'll tell you like some of the worst like blood pressure inducing problems came from Snapchat
Mm.
and stupid stuff that kids did on Snapchat.
Right.
Like because they because when they're 12 years old, like they think they're adults, but they're not. so
Yeah.
Oh, heavens.
so they do like they don't have the capacity to like consider consequences and things like that,
Mhm.
as well as like an adult can.
Yeah.
So like so they start drama all the time on Snapchat or Instagram, and then the drama would spill over
Sure.
into the school, and the teachers would be the ones stuck dealing with it, because usually at that point was when the principal would lock themselves in their room and cry.
Yeah, they with phones and social media, I think it was in Finland if I'm not mistaken, they had launched phones marketed for kids, like little cell phones that like were shaped like bears or like little kittens or like brightly colored. And
Well, they have those here, like not real cell phones, but they have like toy cell phones for
no,
kids.
yeah, but these were like when the second generation towers were out. These were like real phones in Finland that were like, yeah, like we want kids to have them. And the whole idea was that the phones had like a GPS ability, and like they only had like a few capabilities, like could call parents, like they didn't have to actually dial a number. They just had like speed dial buttons. So like the idea was to like, keep track of kids, kind of. Like there was some oddities about these phones. But long story short, these phones ended up getting banned actually pretty quickly. And it had to do with regulations that pointed out some of the impacts that the second generation towers had with phones on developmental minds. And this carries on into future impacts with, the third and fourth generation towers as well. But like, when you say like what age can kids really get on social media, I mean, in a weird way, we're kind of talking about at what age can we really be exposed to that level of tower electromagnetic field manipulation. Even sitting behind a computer with Wi-Fi for a certain amount of time can have some effect on a young developmental body. So it's an interesting factor that there is some biological element to what we're talking about a little bit here. And I know really only so little bit about it, but that's why I like that your school is teaching about this digital citizenship and responsibility, and also some of the dark elements of the trolls under these bridges we cross all across the internet. So I like that, but it's funny to think about at what age should a child be introduced to social media? Should it even be a child? Should it be a young adult? Should it be a teenager? What should be the age or maturity level we put on social media?
That's an interesting question. And as someone who doesn't have children, I mean, that's hard for me but I really think about that a lot. I have a lot of friends who have kids. I know that at this point, a lot of them get iPads at a young age. And
that's another worry about a lot of parents with all this digital learning too.
There needs to be a way to like, I mean, I hope that there's a way, I'm sure there must be a way to like have parental control set on it. So there's a way to prevent kids from like accessing certain websites that they don't want.
Oh yeah, no, there's parental, like I know how to use, not that I have anyone to use them for, but I know how to use the parental controls on iPhones.
Yeah. So, it's a changing world, and I guess it's hard to not, I would imagine it's hard to not cave in and get your kids one when like everyone else is getting their kids one at this point. But I also do feel, I don't know how much of a negative impact it could potentially have when kids get to like an over-reliance on that as opposed to like, you know, playing outside and using our imaginations the way we did when we were kids.
Yeah, no, it's very true. You know what I find also though is very interesting as far as like right now these days, as far as that, like when you say playing outside like we did when we were kids, like there's so much more quote unquote, I guess, for lack of a better term, there's so much more risk aversion on the part of parents now too. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like what was I reading the other day? Like I was reading that like there's some state that like actually has a law in the books saying that you shouldn't leave any kid under 13 home alone for any given amount of time.
That's insane. That's insane.
Well, the McAllisters would have had a problem, but
Well, that's because they had so many kids and they forgot to keep track of them.
but like but in real life, like the movie Home Alone notwithstanding, like you just said that's ridiculous. I mean, my parents didn't leave me home alone when I was like through most of elementary school, but by like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, like if it was just me, like if they had my brother with them because he was younger, like they didn't think I was old enough to babysit, but if it was for him, but if it was just me, like they would leave me and they took him with them. They would leave me home alone at like 9, 10, 11.
Yeah.
They taught me how to call 911. They taught me how to use the phone to like call their office, like if something went wrong, like because there was no cell phones, if they were going to like someplace where I couldn't, like they would always leave the number of where they were going, plus like the neighbor's phone number, if you know,
Those were the days.
if something went wrong, and they would just like, and that they would just go and move on with their lives, like, and they would just go and move on with their lives and leave me at home. But like, you know, I was babysitting for like, by the time I was 12 years old, I was in charge of getting my younger brother off the bus because the middle school, like they were economizing them. They didn't want to buy double the amount of buses, so they staggered the schedule so that the elementary school got out an hour later than
Yeah, that happened
the middle and high
when I
school.
was going to school.
So
Like I used to meet my brother after school because they would get out just down the street
Yeah.
and we'd go around the corner home.
like I would, like we
had
got
to
out
walk
at,
our asses home.
that's what I was gonna say. Like we got out at, like when I was in 7th grade, right? We got out at 2:15. I walked home, like I was allowed to, like I walked home. My parents were both at work. I would call them to check in and let them know I was home. And, or like they asked me to call when I got my brother off the bus. But like,
Can you just turn the light off when you leave?
but like they would call it, like my brother would be off the bus at 3:30 and they would ask me to call like when he got off the bus, like, and you know, I would babysit for him until like 5 or 6 when one of my parents would get home.
Yeah.
And I mean then like by like 8th grade I was getting paid to babysit for other people's kids. And now like I was getting paid when I was 12 to babysit for other people's kids outside of the house. And now they're saying like, oh, it's illegal to leave a kid home alone at all under 13. Like,
Yeah, it's weird.
give me a break. You know what I mean?
Who's saying that again?
There's some state, I don't remember where it was off the top of my head, but there's some state that actually has a law in the books that it's considered child neglect to leave a kid home alone if they're under 13 now.
Are we talking about the Latch-Key Kid album
Yeah.
again?
Yeah. And like, what,
So ridiculous.
A+. That's Sam's new favorite artist.
we're not doing this. We're not doing this. Like,
What aren't we doing?
Oh, Sam's favorite new artist, this guy named A+. He was a one-hit wonder in the 90s, but he had a lot of talent. He just, just never really hit his stride. Just didn't
So
work
it
out for him.
was flesh in the pan.
Yeah, exactly.
but like,
A bright light like a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
but I feel like, that's ludicrous to me when like, for it to be considered like,
Hey, don't drag Ludacris into this.
oh, damn it.
That's big. That's big of you, Sam. I appreciate that.
Damn it, I walked right into that one. But it's ridiculous to me that like something that my parents did on a normal basis 20 to 25 years ago would be illegal in some states today, like would be considered child neglect to people today.
Yeah.
Under 13, you're not supposed to let themselves in their house or whatever. They can't have a latchkey situation.
Just like be alone.
They can't leave.
With no adult present. No supervision.
Well,
For how long? It's got to be a time.
Question.
There's got to be a time constraint.
but like, no, it's just that like, sorry, I put myself on mute because Misha was asking if we had hot chocolate, but like,
Yeah, that's a little too spicy for the group.
but basically, like, they were saying that like whatever the state was had a law in the books that like parents could get an ACS case and get charged with child neglect
For how long? For leaving them alone for how long?
at all
Yeah, depending on the age.
if they were under 13, which I think is ridiculous because like I said, I was babysitting for other people's kids and getting paid for it when I was 12. Like, I think that
There are some interesting things to think about that. Like,
and I would not,
that's some child labor.
but like I would not like
Where's OSHA?
Oh no, I should have sued the people I should have sued were my parents because that was unpaid labor to watch my brother. But
Well, if it's family, it's not.
but like
classified
I'm
as-
joking. But
You actually can get paid to watch your family, like to watch like an older family member or something.
Yeah.
There's like the state
That
has
is
like a
true.
thing. The state has like a program.
well, my parents paid me like if they left me and like if I stayed with my brother at night while they went out. But like
Yeah, we're not talking about like hospice. That's different.
Damn.
No, I mean like my parents paid me to my parents would actually pay me to babysit my brother, like if it was at night and they were going to a concert or something, but not if it was like part of like my regular obligation to get him off the bus.
Right.
But like if it was a special occasion, yeah, they'd pay me. But like I think it's just interesting because I mean I by no means would have ever considered we've had our differences, but I would never have considered either of my parents bad parents, and they would be seen like not in the least, and they would be seen as like being neglectful to have done what they did
Well,
with you and my brother.
the further you go back, the worse it gets. I mean, there are definitely things that parents used to do that would universally be considered child abuse now.
I mean, they were, well, no, you're absolutely right. Like, there is history of things. There is history of things happening. There is history of things in my family that, like, would be considered, like, abuse and domestic violence now. Like, not in my immediate family, but, like, I'm talking, like, ancestors.
Right.
Like, there were issues with, like, abuse and alcoholism and stuff that were considered normal back then.
Yep.
Like when my great grandparents were raising my grandparents, like the way that the way that my grandparents got disciplined would have probably even been considered like child abuse and domestic violence by the time we were kids.
Well, I'm sure that it was anyway.
But no, it wasn't it wasn't considered that way.
But it was, whether you considered it that way or not.
But the thing is,
Sounds like that's how it was.
Oh no,
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm not debating that's how it was.
That's the whole point, though. Is like
they didn't think they were doing anything wrong.
Yeah, back then it wasn't. Like,
but does that somehow diminish the impact, or?
No, not at all. I'm just saying that, like,
it changes. It's a different perspective for sure. It does diminish the impact and the fact that you're doing something that was the
socially
norm,
acceptable,
and that you weren't like doing something that you were seen as a monster for. So that's totally. I mean, that does change the impact. It does.
But seriously, like, I mean, look, like my grandparents were getting like beat with belts when they were growing up, and their parents called it discipline. None of that was acceptable by the time we were kids, and that would have been an ACS call even when I was a kid. But my parents were doing none of that kind of thing. They were just leaving me home alone and taught me how to call 911, you know? So, like, the fact, like, it just...
I mean, I knew kids my age that were hit. Like, it didn't happen to me, but it still fucking happened.
Oh, no. But that's the point I'm making. Like, that's the point that I'm making. Like, it's ridiculous to me that people like my parents could potentially catch a neglect case.
Wait, how old are you, Emily?
When they're if I was a kid now,
I'm asking you how old you are.
Oh, 36.
Okay. See, I mean, you're like, what we're talking about is like totally different in different cultures. Like, it's not even just an age or an era thing. Like, you saying that growing up, kids getting hit with belts would have been ACS. Like, that was like the norm.
Yeah.
That was like, getting hit with belts was not like if everyone would have been an ACS if that was the case. Like,
yeah,
as far as people that I know.
There was some physical interdisciplinary action in my family in the early parts of me growing up, though I learned very quickly how to defend myself mentally and physically as a result. I can't say it was the best method. It had its purposes. I wonder what abuse would look like. I mean, you talk about bullying and you talk about some things that happen in school. Some of the things my uncle did to me watching me prepared me for bullying in school. I already knew what the bully was thinking about doing. So I was able to even psychologically defend myself from their trolling because of my uncle being already this like ridiculous troll.
Right.
So to spare some details, it's just that times change and things are different. And as we learn a better language to represent the different generational developments, we're going to see different results. I mean, that's partly what it is we look at this generational, these differences between generations, and for the most part, we're still human and we're still developing and learning, and we're still seeing the results of these different methods. That's something to keep in mind too.
But I think like here's,
Mhm.
I'm just pointing out like the
Yeah.
difference, like, you know, for example, like, and again, like, it's not only what generation it's in, you're right, culture does play a role in it as well. Like, but even like in my case, you know, my parents, they didn't hit me with a belt. I still got spanked. Like, they, like, they saved that for when it was really bad. Like, but like, I still got spanked, you know. I got left home alone at like age 9 or 10, and
Mm-hmm.
people get arrested for both of those things these days. Like, I've seen
Right.
kids I've seen kids like, or I've talked to like, in like in my professional capacity, like I've talked to parents who are, the kids run the show in their house. Like, they're ostensibly, the parents are terrified to punish the kids because they're terrified of the kids, or a teacher for that matter, calling ACS on them.
Right. I feel like there is a sense of, you know, you're gonna be home from school maybe at like 3-ish or something like that, and then your parents are gonna be coming from home like around 5-ish or 6-ish. Like there was like a grace period built into the latchkey thing, but it was never supposed to be like you're gonna be home for like days at a time on your own or
Well,
something
no,
like that.
but of course not. But like, and I was never left at home for days on my own at age 10 either. Like,
Yeah.
I was at least like an adult before that happened. But
Right.
but you know, for like, even in high school, if my parents went on vacation, they told me to go sleep over at a friend's house. But
Yeah.
but like, you know, but I think that the issue is that some people consider what you just said is like the latchkey kid grace period even to be neglectful nowadays.
Is that the general consensus, or is that just the state? Like, what's the deal with that? Because the reason why I ask is because I know you deal with like a lot of people of like color in your work, and like the idea of, and you know, these folks are younger, so maybe times have changed, but like the idea, like me hearing that getting hit with a belt, you know, for someone that's still within, you know, my range, within, you know, six years of my range is like, I'm not going to say it's shocking, but it's a little bit surprising. But I would think that, like, how does that work in communities where that is the norm? Is it just like, does it have to be like hidden from like faculty, or does faculty give them grace, or like, or what's like the deal there?
I mean, personally, and I can't speak for other people, because like, I can't speak for other people and how they handle it. But me personally, I've actually witnessed a lot of like unnecessary situations, shall I say,
Yeah.
happen because I've witnessed a lot of escalated situations because of cultural differences that didn't have to happen. Like I find, for example, like kind of getting into like I was thinking more so as far as like different generations, but it is true as well that, like, say for example, like physical discipline is looked on more unfit, like as being more problematic and unfavorable by white people than it is for the Black community.
Yeah.
Which I think is what is kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah.
But like, or like, you know, in the Latinx community, like my friends always joke about getting the chancla thrown at them,
Right.
which is like the parent, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, which is like the joke about the parent getting mad at them and throwing their flip-flop at them. But like, but
See, it does.
like, for lack of a better term, like, so yeah, you're right, like it is less culturally, physical discipline is less culturally acceptable for white people than it is in some communities of color. And I think that there's actually, and honestly, I've actually seen some issues of that, like, of like teachers who are white freaking out about like some of the ways, like I never had a situation where a parent, like some of my coworkers did, and they did report it, but I don't actually even know if they called ACS. But some of I've had situations, I haven't had a situation of like a parent hitting a kid. Like, I haven't had a situation of a parent doing anything physical to their kid in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
I have had a lot of parents say, like in parent-teacher conferences, like, oh, I'm gonna whoop his ass or whatever for these grades. But like,
Oh.
and to be honest with you, I've never called if I just hear a parent say, I'm gonna whoop his ass, because that's, to be honest with you, that's a very common thing that Black parents say when they're upset with their kid, and I would never get off the goddamn phone if I called ACS every time I heard that. So,
Right, because just because they say that doesn't necessarily mean they actually went home and did just that. They may, I mean, there's a possibility that happened, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it actually did.
But will I keep an eye on that kid for the next week or so for any bruises or anything? Sure.
Yeah.
But like, I wouldn't make a call just then. Now, if a parent said that and like the kid came back the next day with bruises, yes, I would call.
Right.
But if a parent, but I think that like sometimes like physical discipline is so frowned upon by, for lack of a better term, non-marginalized groups, that like physical discipline is like looked down upon by like upper middle class to upper class to wealthy white America. And to the point where like you get like your teacher who like hasn't had as much, you get like your white teacher teaching in a community of color who hasn't had as much experience around people from those communities, and they get shocked and start freaking out, like if they hear like a parent say like, oh, I'm gonna whoop his ass when I get home, when I would say 95% of the time that parent's just venting. And you always have to be on the lookout for like the 1% of the, for like the 5% of the time that the parent actually goes home and does it.
Well, it's not just a matter of do and don't. It's what that phrase actually means. That's what's being missed here.
I mean,
Like, it doesn't mean that most of them aren't doing it. It just means that phrase doesn't mean what you might think it means. I mean, those kids are probably like, that phrase can mean like you get a whooping or a spanking or something like that. It doesn't mean that they're going
beating
home
the
and
shit out of
punching.
them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's
true too. That's a good point. Like, I mean, like I say it too. Like sometimes when I see kids acting like fools in public, like I'm like kids in general, not my students, but any kids, if I see kids acting like fools in the mall, sometimes like I'll just look at them and be like, and say to myself even that what the hell are these people doing? That would have not, what the hell are these parents doing? That would not have flown in my household. Like, and I'll say things like, I'll say things like, I would have got my ass kicked if I behaved that way in public. And not because my parents beat the shit out of me, but simply because, like, that's my way of expressing, like, if I was believe me, because it happens, like, if I was temper tantruming in the mall, they would have, like, literally dragged me out of the mall and spanked me. Like,
Yep.
I mean, and it's not, I mean, this isn't,
Yeah, I have that experience as well.
well, and this isn't something I talk about, like, too often, because even my mom is kind of embarrassed about this. Not something she did, but she's kind of embarrassed about this happening in her family. Like, and I remember this I don't remember too much I don't remember a ton of things from being a little kid, but you know how you always remember like specific experiences?
Sure.
Like, because they're just like poignant or altering, like that they just stick with you.
Yeah.
Or rare.
Yeah.
When my brother was born, my grandparents had come up from down south to basically like to help my dad out at home and take care of me, because my brother was a C-section baby, and back then they would actually keep you in the hospital for a week if you had a C-section and then tell you not to do anything for a while. So my grandparents came to help my dad out with me, and they took me to the hospital. Like to go visit my mom, and like to meet my brother, and I was fine in the hospital, but when I left, like I was so upset about having to leave my mom there that like in my kid brain I did not react well and threw a big temper tantrum right out in front of the front door to the hospital in public. And my grandmother was like, I'm glad my dad was still like up inside the hospital with my mom and my brother, and had just like, my dad had stayed and just told my grandparents to take me home because I seemed tired or something. And I was glad my dad wasn't physically there to see this, because there would have been problems if he had been, because he wouldn't have stood for this. But my grandmother, I was being a little brat, and and in hindsight, I know I was being like a pain in the ass little kid who couldn't control herself, because that's what kids do. And my grandmother went to like a nearby bush, like broke off a stick and
Oh.
and hit me with it, because that was just like, that was normalized, like
Yeah.
in her family, like in the South growing up. And my mom is embarrassed about that, because she's like, well, we never disciplined her that way. And mind you, that was the only time that I was ever disciplined like that.
Oh,
Like
wow.
This was your
physically.
This was your aunt or your grandmother?
My mom's, yeah, my grandmother, my mom's mother. Like,
I always wondered about that. I always wondered about if people ever were in a situation where like their parents discipline their kids, because it always seems like between a generation it could be vastly different.
oh yeah, and I honestly, I do think that, I know my mom got into blows with her mother sometimes about like how, about like my grandparents like rules for me versus like how they wanted to raise me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that they didn't want to use as much physical discipline, or like
Yeah.
on the flip side, my mom used to get mad because honestly, and most of it was books anyway, so they never complained, but
Mm-hmm.
too much. But I would, like, if I said I wanted something to my grandparents, like I would have it in my hands within 24 hours. Like,
Oh,
we would,
if you asked your grandparents for it?
if I asked my grandparents for it, like, and I mean, if they were visiting, or if I was visiting them, like if we were together in person, like I would, if I asked for something, I would get it. And even if, and I think it's because they felt guilty that they weren't around, because they lived 3 states away. So they tried to make up for it by buying things.
Mm-hmm.
But like, even I could, but now that you say it, like even I could, like I could have said on the phone, like, you know, oh, I really want to buy like the new installment of whatever series, of whatever book series. Like, I really want to buy the next 3 books of the Babysitters Club.
Right.
And I would get like, 3 days later in our mailbox, there would be a card with a $20 bill in it and a note that said, go buy Emily her books. Like, and that used to really upset my parents, because
Mm.
they didn't want to raise me basically to be a spoiled brat.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them, and they did a good enough job, like themselves, counteracting my grandparents wanting them to do so, or wanting to
Right.
spoil me. But like, that was that was one of those, but the thing with like the physical discipline, that was one of those things that, like, in hindsight, I would just be like, oh my God, thank God. Like, thank
Mm.
God my dad was not with us at that time, because to put it bluntly, my dad was always an extremely mild-mannered guy that you rarely ever saw got mad.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have lost his shit over that. I know he would have.
Yeah.
Like, so that's just kind of like, and my mom's embarrassed, like, to this day, that, her mother did that. So it's just like one of those things where it's like different times, different cultures,
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
whatever. But anyways, like, point being, like, going back to like what we were saying before, like, I don't actually remember if she did, but she really could have left a bruise on me, and then And then when I went to, so I was in pre-K. Yeah, I was in pre-K when my brother was born. Like, then when I went, then the pre-K teacher could have like called it in, you know what I mean? And I wouldn't have blamed them one bit if they did. Like, but that would have sucked for my parents because that's not something they themselves would do.
Yep.
Like, so I think it's just like, it's hard because I feel like there's just so many, and I don't know if you notice this, Sam, from your end as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where you, like, working in, where you work? Because,
Yeah.
but, like, I feel like there's a fair amount of situations where, like, abuse claims are found unsubstantiated because of, like, mixed signals about cultural norms, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I do
Like-
know what you mean.
Like that you would have, like, say, for example, like a white teacher calling into ACS for, like, something like a parent saying, oh, I'm gonna whoop their ass when I get home. Or like a kid joke, or like a Latinx kid joking about getting the chancla when they get home because of their grade.
Yeah,
Like,
I can't reveal any specific details or names or even talk about
of course not.
instances. But I can tell you that that things like that do happen. Yes.
Like in a general sense, that things like
Yes.
that do sometimes happen.
There's definitely miscommunication, and yeah, there are and frequently a lot of especially not just like, but like cultures or like people who or like immigrants from like other countries who are like coming from those cultures. A lot of that is there's still like corporal punishment used sometimes, and the extent, and so as a result of that, the extent of it in terms of what is considered normal childhood discipline and what would be considered extreme has to really be investigated, because there's just a lot, like different cultures will sometimes use different methods of discipline, and so there is sometimes confusion, so and lack of understanding. So
do educators end up putting themselves in a situation where they're like, okay, this person belongs to this group. We know that discipline is done this way in this group, kind of give them a pass, or like, does it work like that?
I don't know if that can be done, because I feel like they're concerned that if they are too loose or too lenient and something happens to the child on like their watch while they're in their care and in an educational sense, then they'll be held responsible for it.
Exactly. Like we have it.
It's just got to be done equally across the board.
Well, here's the thing is, we're told, like in our training, and I know this very well because they make us do a mandated training on this every year at the beginning of the school year. They do make us do a refresher training on this, but on what it means to be a mandated reporter. Like, we just legit had that training for this school year 2 days ago. So I can tell you right now, like, what we're told to do is that basically, like, if we suspect that there's abuse going on, we need to call, like, we need to call it in. Like, that's where, like, you know, the term mandated reporter comes in. But like, I mean, here's the thing. I won't, but so they say, like, they pound it into your head that, like, if you don't call it in and something happens and they find out that you knew about it and didn't call it in, you could lose your license. So that's why, so teachers get scared by that. And then, I mean, they don't want to, none of us want to have our careers ruined because we failed to act on our duties as mandated reporters.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they tell you too all the time. It's like you don't want to be the one whose name ends up on page 6.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want my name all over the post as an example of what horrible people teachers are. So
Yeah. Or government employees, right?
because like the post is quite good at bashing teachers, but like the point of the matter is that like, but the way, on the flip side though, the way I interpret that is that there still has to, in order to call, there still has to be like, to use like judicial terminology. To me personally, I feel like in order to call, there still has to be probable cause to call rather than reasonable suspicion. Like,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
to equate it, like, you can't just be calling ACS because you have a hunch but no evidence.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
that bogs up the system.
Right.
But like, if you have probable cause, like the kid is always coming in with bruises, or even
or
worse,
dirty, or even just dirty clothes, like
or
other
dirty clothes
all the time. Yeah.
Or like cat piss or something, or
they smell bad. Like it's just
or if like, you know, a kindergartner comes in smelling like weed all the time.
Yeah, it's Maslow's triangle. If it's not being met, there's usually something broken in the psychological development of the child. But to speak on this too, I do know a teacher who actually took a student in. The student had been experiencing some problems in their home life. The teacher questioned them. The student had a hard time answering the questions, and the teacher invited the student to spend some time at their house. It was kind of going out on a limb a little bit for the student, and
that's
Uh,
it was very risky. That's
very risky on the part of the teacher.
Yes, exactly. But you know, it ended up working out. You know, and I'll say that as like kind of this like shot in the dark story. Like this is something you see in a movie or read in a book. But like,
was there like a full on discussion with the parents or?
No, see, that was the problem. Is there was also partly a language barrier with this student and the parents. The parents did not speak English as a first language, but the student obviously was speaking both languages, and the teacher just made a decision based on some of what was happening and offered the student the chance to change their living environment. And the student took this chance, carried it on through the winter, you know, a couple of months. Enough.
And the parents never reached out and said, "Hey, where's my kid?"
Right, exactly. So that was part of the thing, is the parents in their attempt to reach out gave the teacher a chance to talk to the parents about what was happening with the child. And the parents at first even tried to claim that the child was causing problems and the child was a problem. The teacher said, "You know what? Don't worry about it. Like, I'll take care of your problem child if there's such a problem." And you know, that was you know what I'm saying? So like, the teacher saw that the student was not really a problem, but the parents tried to blame shift it on the student. And so the teacher, you know, took a risk and really jeopardized their whole career over this. And that's why I'm even going to save names here and save, you know, whatever details I can. But like, to say for sure, a teacher did make that risk on behalf of a student who noticed some of these Maslow triangle needs not being met, some communication problems, and altered this student's life, you know, an impact that carried on well into their adulthood. And that's where I end up finding about the story is someone I know later on in life who introduces me to this teacher, and I meet this teacher as if this teacher were their second parent. You know, I met this person's parents, but this teacher was really more of their parent than anything else, and kind of gave me the little parental rundown and like, you know, hey, you know, you kids doing the right thing, taking care of each other. And this person's parents, you know, when I had met them, they were happy to not have to deal with their child. So I imagine back in the school days, it was very much the same modality where the parents were like, oh, good, I'm glad we don't have to deal with, you know, our child, what a problem they were.
Yeah.
But the teacher was happy to play this role as the secondary parent. And what a beautiful moment to really show how like communal equity and family values work together there. And like you guys as teachers are like this golden moment in the community where you're playing this role as a family member. You're a part of the family. Like those parent teacher conference moments, I mean, you're basically teaching the parents how to be teachers, and the parents are teaching you how to be parents, because you're learning about the different dynamics in each household in those parent teacher meetings. I always found that fascinating, kind of learning about that, seeing how teachers changed after meeting parents too. Like even my own parents, like after a teacher would meet with parents on parent teacher night, that following week was like different. There was different things. It was interesting to notice. I was very socially and psychologically aware to have picked up on it, but teachers, I have a golden place in my heart for teachers everywhere of all kinds.
Oh, I say all the time, like, I've never given birth, but I have triplets because I have like these kids at my school, like it's three teenage boys, like they're like 16, 17, 18 ish. Like they're somewhere between the age bracket. Like, and they're all like best friends from their old school. Slash grew up. I think 2 out of the 3 of them actually go back to like pre-K, but like all 3 of them, like, but I say I have triplets because it's not like they don't have their own biological moms and decent family lives, but they still call me mom because they're like, well, that's my real mom. You're my second mom. So I always like that's,
Yeah, I remember occasionally feeling like that when I was a kid too, or at least hearing other people say that too. Yeah, every once in a while. Yeah, I had that.
but I just think it's hilarious because like even like it'd be funny because like even on the street, like in front of the school, if they saw me, they'd be like, Ma, do you have any food? you have any of this, that, or the other? Like I would feed them breakfast. Sometimes I bring them breakfast in the morning if I knew they hadn't eaten, like, or something. And it's kind of hilarious because these 3 boys, like they do not look at all like they could have ever been my biological children. But they call to put it, but they call me mom like all the time. Like it's just like we have that kind, like they call me mom and I say I have triplet sons.
Oh
like,
dear.
Like it's just like kind of like that give and take, like second mom, kind of like what you say, like it takes a village to raise people.
Yeah.
But like I think I'm not